Okay, welcome to my speech. I'm going to talk about substance use disorder, also known as SUD. So imagine picking up an hourglass and flipping it over. The sand goes through the tunnels and then it ends. It's over, right? That's a pretty accurate description of my best friend's short life. She was really one of my best friends. We did everything together. But she began using drugs and surrounding herself with pretty questionable people. So I had to love her from a distance. I was still there for her, cared for her, but couldn't hang out with her and engage in those kind of activities. This was even to the point that she missed my wedding, which was very upsetting. Then soon after, she announced she was pregnant, so we were all like, yay, maybe this would be, the tables are turning, everything's gonna be great. Well, a few weeks after that, she was found dead from an overdose. So no matter really what the situation is, people that has that bad of an addiction, they're not gonna stop what they're doing. They're not. She sought help many times, but she never overcame that battle. But according to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, there's more than 932,000 overdose deaths that's happened in the States just since 1999. This is not including people that's overdosed and they've brought back. This is deaths. So that number is much larger for people that do suffer from this. And then COVID started, so that was an understandably really hard time for everybody, and this really increased that number. And just in that year, that time period of the pandemic, it was 200,000 people that make up that number. Overall, the point of this is that the country needs to put its people first. Addiction is one of the biggest problems that we face, and people that don't have that problem, I guess, or they don't have anybody that has that problem, they're not affected by it, we need to be the voice of the vulnerable. We should advocate for policy change and easier accessibility of resources for those that are suffering from this problem. Having a thorough background of understanding drug addiction will help us create better policies and reforms for that. So a little bit of the background, substance use disorder is defined by a problematic pattern of substance use, which tends to lead to impairments in health, social function, and control over everyday life, which is exactly what happened to my friend. It does not discriminate. It can happen to anybody, poor, rich, young, old, doesn't matter. Income bracket, it doesn't matter. And it is technically classified as a mental health illness, which is oftentimes accompanied by other known mental health illnesses such as anxiety, depression, things like that. And this is another fact that I pulled from the CDC that according to them, 1 in 7 Americans said that they have experienced some form of substance use disorder age 12 and older, which is pretty sad. How does this work? It causes changes in the brain chemistry. It produces long-term behavioral effects. When somebody engages in this type of behavior, it is the brain's flooded with chemicals that stimulate the reward system, which will increase use, and then they'll get, they'll build up tolerance to it, which means more use, and then they'll probably end up overdosing and dying from that. Co-occurring disorders, that's how mental illnesses and substance use kind of go hand in hand, oftentimes, typically. According to Chandler, he states that drugs and alcohol use disorders oftentimes go hand in hand with depression, anxiety, and severe mental illness. A lot of people that already suffer from mental illness use drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with it. Anxiety, for example, or depression. They try to escape their mind from it, but in reality, it's going to come back around the next day whenever they sober up, and then they're probably going to do it again and again and again. A lot of people don't realize when they start to engage in this type of behavior, substances typically magnify the mental illness. It makes it worse. So really, they're not coping with it. They're making the problem worse, and they don't understand that. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, some of the most common co-occurring mental health problems that follow along with substance abuse, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and borderline personality disorder. And then if you do have a friend that you suspect could be engaging in this, some physical signs to look out for, frequently getting in trouble, could be legal problems, financial problems, irritability, bloodshot eyes, and slurred speech. So for advocation, we need to advocate for policy change and reform. One of the most important resources that somebody needs whenever they're dealing with this type of problem is they need social and clinical support. Not only should addiction be treated, but they also need to look at what mental illnesses could be accompanying that disorder. So in order to take a step in the right direction, this is kind of cliche, but we can't make already illegal drugs more illegal. So I think that we should offer some type of screening supplies to test the drugs, because we're not going to stop people using drugs. We're not going to stop people trafficking them. It's just not possible. It's not going to happen. So I think at least to eliminate the problem of people overdosing and dying, we could have some type of screening supplies. Secondly, there should be more accessible treatment centers. A lot of people don't have insurance, or if they do have insurance, it's a really large copay or a really large deductible, and they're just like, well, that's gonna, cause more financial distress. Let me drink some more, or whatever their drug choice is. So we need somehow a cheaper way for these people to access that. In addition to these treatment centers, there should also be easier and cheaper access to Narcan. This can be expensive depending on the pharmacy. Obviously, this will make a lower cost to the patient, and it's a life-saving medication when it's needed. So, again, I'm not enabling these people. It's already going to happen. We already have drug trafficking, so we can at least make it safer. And then lastly, another major reason people die from overdoses is because maybe they're with a group of friends and they're too scared to say something because they think they're going to get in trouble, and then they might dump them. I mean, that happens a lot of times, and that person will end up overdosing. So we should change the laws to save that reporting party due to any kind of legal concerns. No one should be afraid to get help and potentially save a life. So today I've discussed what substance abuse disorder is, how mental health accompanies this disorder, and what we can do to help. I personally, like I said, I don't think it would be completely prevented, but with a few steps, we could make a significant change, especially in those numbers. That's a very large number, especially when the pandemic hit. 200,000 out of that 932,000 since 1999, that's a very large number. Through my research, I found that substance abuse disorder affects more people than I thought. The number I gave in my introduction is merely an estimation. This does not include everyone, like I said, that has overcame the overdose, got Narcan and was able, luckily, to come back. So it's a much larger number. It's so much easier to say don't do drugs, and we have programs already in schools, like DARE, to mitigate that epidemic, but I was once a person that said the same statement until I became somebody that was personally affected by that. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
There are several states like Elkhart, Indiana that have implemented free Narcan vending machines for users who overdose to get repeated Narcan for free. What is your response to people who are fighting against that, stating that that's just enabling them more and causing a bigger issue to have free available Narcan and to tell them that it's okay to overdose over and over?
I think they need to be more educated, because they're obviously somebody that's not dealt with it personally or has somebody close to them that dealt with it. Like I said, I was somebody that was like, well, don't do drugs. It's not that hard. You know what they do. But we don't understand what goes on in these people's minds, But now that I unfortunately had that personal connection with it, I see it differently.